Well, listen, good morning, everyone. As mentioned, my name's Dave. I'm the founder and CEO of Senseon. So today I'm going to speak about the hidden costs of your security stack. Why am I speaking about this is the obvious question. Well, Senseon's really good at three things. We're good at helping people digitally transform and secure their cloud environments. We're good at rapidly maturing security stacks. But also what we're very good at and what we've been doing more and more recently is cost optimization and efficiency. Now, cybersecurity budgets are normally very resilient in the face of economic downturns, but there's a lot of strategic drivers that we will talk about that regardless of what your budget is doing, is going to be driving a requirement to do more with the team that you have. And so we're going to talk about that today. We're going to cover three things. We've only got 15 minutes, so some of it's going to be the top of the waves, but we'll talk about what's driving the proliferation of cost and complexity, and then we'll decide what tools and techniques can we use to decide what to keep, cut, or combine, and then we'll just talk through like a real-world example to give you an idea of where some of the common bottlenecks are and how to unblock those for you and your team if it's relevant for you. So firstly, the proliferation of costs. What's been driving it? Well, of course, we've been impacted by a number of strategic trends in cybersecurity over the years, not least complexity, as opposed to having our traditional sort of castle and moat with all our data inside. As we sort of talked about, with the proliferation of cloud services and cloud providers, much more akin to like an archipelago of many data islands, each with its own attack surface and its own complexity in and of itself. Of course, we've just been hearing about the evolution of the threat, and they continue at pace. They're better organized, they're better funded, they're better resourced than ever before. Something that is incredibly important in terms of driving up cost is the degree by which data is produced, adopted, and consumed in the world. Now, interestingly, this has increased tenfold over the last 10 years, and we're now cruising towards around about 200 zettabytes being produced, adopted, and consumed every year. Just to put that in context, if in your mind, if 1 byte equaled 1 grain of rice, you could fill the Pacific Ocean with 1 zettabyte. So imagine, trying to find a threat actor in all of that data. It becomes incredibly challenging to do, and of course, it drives up the cost because we've got to log and record all of that data that's going on. And then finally, the talent shortage, okay? So this has an inflationary pressure on salaries. So with relatively little experience, people within your team can move on and get higher paid jobs elsewhere. And so really what that means is for us as security leaders is to make sure that they're doing deep and meaningful work where possible, which again is something that is a concern of security leaders that I speak to, and again is driving these efficiency initiatives. Okay, so obviously we are in an inflationary period, and during this time there is high degrees of pressure to be efficient and to drive down costs. Another driver that is driving these cost optimization initiatives is also the need to realize the benefit of a lot of Gen AI investments. Not a security-related example, but an example nonetheless. Back in February, the CEO of Klarna announced that their Gen AI chatbot was now dealing with 2/3 of customer service queries in its first month. Just yesterday, he announced he was removing 50% of his workforce because of efficiency, simplification, and standardization initiatives. Now, as part of that, large incumbent SaaS providers such as Salesforce and Workday were also getting removed as part of that initiative. And so the reason why I mention that is while cybersecurity budgets remain resilient, it's not beyond the realms of possibility that, CEOs looking at return on investment from Gen AI is going to be also looking at security teams, and we are seeing that, Okay, so what to keep, cut, or combine. So I'm just going to walk through a three-step process that, again, we find it useful when working with companies on these initiatives. Now, the idea here is obviously to reduce risk while increasing efficiency. That's our job. That's what we care about. We're security folks first and foremost, of course. So we've got to understand, hey, what are the threats that I absolutely must care about? And then what data do I need to be able to detect those threats? Many times when we do this work with businesses, we see lots and lots and lots of overlapping data. And so we ask ourselves the questions, is it complete? Is it timely? And is it consistent? And also, is it in a place that's accessible for many use cases? And then finally, what tools and controls are applied over that data in order to decrease our risk. And then finally, underpinning this all, because of the point that I made about the importance of the team, is how happy and effective are my team when I look at the current setup that I've got. Now, we've already heard that valid accounts are a very, very common method of access, and we've heard also about the evolution of phishing to things like QR codes. A shout out to the Senseon Institute here. They do a lot of data science and analysis based off threat intelligence reports. And again, they have broken it down in terms of what are the most common techniques that we see on a per sector basis. Again, so you can make this very, very relevant for you and your team by actually making sure you're focusing on the sector. Interestingly, the use of generative AI to analyze these reports is going to really allow you to catalyze initiatives like this to be very specific. Of course, the wonderful, wonderful MITRE ATT&CK, I feel I talk about this in every talk that I do, but the important thing about MITRE ATT&CK, we've now got around about, I think, 590 different techniques and sub-techniques that we record and understand threat actors use, but it also maps the data sources that you need to collect to detect those attacks. And the second point being is understanding what data that we have. Is that consistent? Is it timely? And is it complete? And what can we do to enhance that data? So again, MITRE ATT&CK comes in as a very, very useful tool in our arsenal to be able to drive efficiency. And then a great framework presented and developed by a guy called Sunil Yu. Sunil was the chief security scientist. Forgive me, I've still got time to take a sip. Of the Bank of America for about 7 years, and he came up with this cyber defense matrix. Now, for any of you that's worked with any consultants, I don't come from a consultancy background, it's what's known as a mutually exclusive and collectively exhaustive framework with, albeit the old NIST pillars, it doesn't have govern in there across the top. It then categorizes 5 asset classes down the left-hand side, which you can read here, and then there's 3 continuums along the bottom: people, technology, and process. With, as you move to the left to identify, protect, and detect, it's more technology heavy, but of course, as you move into respond and recover, it's much more reliant on people to do that. Now, why is this useful? Well, actually, you can use this for a range of mappings and techniques, but it's useful just everything up to board reporting, to laying over your tools on this framework that realize where you've over-invested in some areas and perhaps not invested in other areas. And this really allows us to be able to understand the tools, the controls, you can map it against CIS benchmarks, etc., in relation to how we are set up to be efficient. Great. Okay, so how do we think about reduce risk, increase team efficiency, and save some money where possible? So let's just look at a worked example. So this is taken from a financial services org, just above 10,000 employees, distributed in more than 10 countries around the world. They had a range of internal tooling, they had a managed SOC, and then they also had an internal SOC. And so this is where common bottlenecks that we find appear. So firstly, the managed SOC is limited due to budget to 225 tickets per month. So they were spending around about 400K a year to collect data into the SIM. Now, interesting, that data only represented 20% of the data that they actually needed. Then 450K on the managed SOC in order to respond to 225 tickets per month and also write analytics and controls over the data they had. The interesting thing, because of the quality of the data, that after 18 months, only 36 analytics were accepted by the SOC because of the noise that they were producing. So again, it talks to the importance of really getting that data in a nice, consistent, and complete way. And then 95% of the alerts from the managed SOC to the internal SOC team were false positives, okay? And the final bottleneck was because they were lacking context, it was taking up to 8 hours to be mean time to remediate, okay? So how do we begin to go about and compare and contrast and drive efficiency here? Well, firstly, it starts with the data collection collection and the tooling? How do we unify data across every single part of their environment? Why is that really useful? If you can unify data across every part of the environment, including multi-cloud, as well as locations, as well as like network data coming from switches, that means your analytics work across every part in your environment. And there's common analytics and tools and techniques that that are common to every single environment. So sorting out the data allows you to drive dramatic false positive reduction and investigation with AI. So across all of our customers, about 93% of the cases are investigated and closed using AI with no human interaction. And out of the box, you get over 1,000 analytics over consistent data that's unified from the point of inception. And when I say it's unified, it's got identity, endpoint, and full deep packet inspection in a single thread. And actually, we heard about the SolarWinds attack. The UK government actually invested in Senseon for our invention of that capability after the SolarWinds attack, because that was a really good example of how to bypass endpoint software. So really good data, over 1,000 analytics, reducing the managed SOC spend, and that gives them additional capacity to not just be throwing alerts over the fence to the internal SOC team, but to actually fully remediate on the assets that they were allowed to remediate on, which drives further efficiency for the internal SOC, which means they're only responding to the sensitive alerts on the sensitive assets, reducing it down to 30 minutes. And so just a couple of ways to identify some bottlenecks and a couple of strategies to dramatically improve those bottlenecks, to not only decrease risk by applying 430% more controls, but also giving you extra money to spend on other things that you want. And of course, more importantly, making sure your team is doing deep and meaningful work, and therefore they're going to stay with you for longer and remain in the business. So to do this with partners, we develop a new value plan process. I won't go through this in detail, but it comes with a full operational and financial model that builds this all up to allow you to understand what the return of investment is. And so it delivers an operational model for security operations. It quantifies the reduction of probability of a material impact and delivers efficiency initiatives across the estate. Okay, so to really wrap up, as I've got 2 minutes left, this is something that we're seeing more and more commonly across, especially public service companies, especially public service, retail, and technology companies. So again, if this is an initiative that you've got, we are just out the back and we have a stand, please do come and speak to us. Across all our customers, we have a 9% false positive rate, and 93% of potentially malicious cases are automatically investigated by AI. We also rapidly mature threat detection, investigation, and response. We deliver it as a managed service if that's required. And then finally, the cloud migrations. You can also get me on here. 2 minutes to go. There you go.
Thank you.
Brilliant. Thank you. Cheers.